everyone. I think we can make a start. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. I'm Councillor James Husband, Chairman of the committee. To my right, I'm joined by my colleagues, fellow councillors, and it will be the five of us who will be making decisions on the cases in front of us this evening. If I can start by asking, are there any apologies for absence?
None, Chairman.
There are no apologies. Can I ask, are there any declarations of interest? Jean.
Chairman, I am a member of the Roof Garden 1990-121 Gisborne High Street, so I ought to sit out of that one.
Yes. No, I agree. And I'm also...
Chairman, I don't think everybody quite...
So we can't,
sorry,
we can't hear you.
Use the microphone.
Yeah, I was declaring an interest in that I'm a member of the Roof Gardens 99-121 Kensington High Street, so I will sit out of that application.
Yeah, that's right. All of those applications. And I should say that when we reach 84 Abingdon Villas, a little while back, I originally was one of the objectors to its licensing application, this cafe, and I think subsequently I've always stepped aside whenever any planning permissions have come up for that premises. So I will, what I'll do is I will step aside, and Councillor Hargreaves will take the chair for consideration of that application. Okay. Now, we just have minutes of the meeting that was held on the 1st of April. Can I sign those, colleagues, as a record?
Agreed.
Is that agreed? I'll sign that. Thank you very much. Okay. So, it might be helpful if I indicate the order in which we're going to consider things this evening. In a few moments' time, we will consider the various applications relating to the Kensington Roof Gardens, and we will go through them in order. We will then, probably after a short break, consider Abingdon Villas, Holland Park Road, Camden Hill Square, Kempsford Gardens, Kingsgate House, Allam House, and then the two applications in Tadama Road. Okay, so that's how we will do things this evening. So in that case, if we can make a start on the first of the Kensington Roof Gardens application. So this is the first one in the pack. So Planning Permission 24 05956, and then there's a listed building consent that goes with it. And Gabi Wesley, you're going to present these as we go through them in sequence. So Gabi, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the committee addendum report, which includes amendments to the officers' report and an additional objection received from the Kensington Square Residents Association. This is an application for planning permission and listed building consent for alterations to the Sun Pavilion, which is located at the Kensington Roof Gardens. Members should note that this is an application to vary a permission from 2022. These alterations include works at both the 6th and 7th floor and include a series of both external and internal alterations which are set out in detail in the supporting officers' report. The site is the 7-storey Grade 2 listed building on the south side of Kensington High Street, which is bounded to the east by Derry Street. The building is currently subdivided into several units and uses, with the basement, ground, 1st and 2nd floors being in a retail use, 3rd and 4th floor being in office use, and the 5th floor being part office and part private members club. The 6th and 7th floors include the historic roof gardens. The roof garden itself is Grade 2 listed and is a registered historic garden, and the site is occupied by a private members club known as the Kensington Roof Gardens. This slide shows an aerial view of the gardens which members may find helpful, with the Sun Pavilion being located on the left-hand side of the screen. This slide shows a photograph of the existing pavilion which is in situ along with the external terrace area. This slide shows the as-built 6th floor level, which includes a slightly larger terrace and double opening doors at the 6th floor level. This slide shows the as-built 7th floor level, which includes another larger terrace outlined in red with 2 additional doors also indicated in red, which would provide additional access to the terrace at this level, along with the internal alterations indicated. This slide shows the proposed pavilion elevation, and the pavilion would increase the height slightly by approximately 400 millimetres, and it also shows the doors which have been installed at both levels of the building. This slide shows the brick infill panels to the rear elevation in comparison with the approval at the top and then the proposed at the bottom. And then this slide shows the tiling which was required previously by condition for the previous approval, which has been installed. This tiling is deemed to be acceptable. The applications have been recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the officer's report, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, there are speakers for this. So first of all, I think Mr. Sterling, are you you're with us, sir? You're there you go. So when you're ready, please, you've got up to 3 minutes to say whatever it is you wish to say. And then after that, we'll hear from the applicant, and then members of the committee may ask questions. So please, go ahead when you're ready.
Sure, thank you very much. I'll be very quick, but I think this is the first of 4 applications, just general statements. I think this application and the subsequent ones are somewhat illustrative of Kensington Roof Gardens' approach to dealing with RBKC and the local residents. It's really sort of don't ask for permission, rather ask for forgiveness. And I think, you know, throughout you're seeing unauthorized works conducted, and only after the event, retrospective applications are being submitted. Throughout this process, the applicants sought to obfuscate by providing insufficient and conflicting information in support of these proposals. So it's not really acceptable, we think, and we don't think RBKC should continue to sort of tolerate this type of behavior in this application or the next 3 that we're about to hear. We contest the current proposal do not ensure good living conditions for neighbouring occupiers and don't preserve the character and appearance of Kensington Square Conservation Area, in particular the special architectural historic interest of a Grade 2 listed building. In fact, the report by RBKC states cumulatively the majority of unauthorised changes are unwelcome. To get to the specifics, the specific points that we contest are that the club is seeking to bring the inside of the club outside. The proposals include an increase in the footprint of the terrace area serving the 7th floor and also the 6th floor on the western frontage. And the western frontage, as we saw from the map, overlooks residential homes and will lead to an increased noise disturbance, which will harm the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers. The current OMP does not envisage the increased level of usage and would therefore not be adequate to manage these sorts of changes. The second area is the canopies and opening up of 2 terrace doors on the 7th floor and 4th terrace doors, which stand exactly next to a DJ booth on one of those floors, which again, if they're open throughout the evening, will lead to noise spilling out into the area overlooking residential homes. So those are probably the 2 main ones, and then the proposed lighting on the 7th and 6th floor will create light overspill unless it's controlled. We note that there's already overspill from trees that have fairy lights on them turned on at all times, and the barriers facing residents since December. And this sort of new light pollution hasn't really been addressed since December last year. And then finally, the unauthorised decking, which was mentioned in the Spanish garden and the woodland garden, which was objected to by the council's arboricultural team, not least because the club has been installing furniture on them for lounging, drinking and dining, brings significant intensification. So I think in conclusion, what we're looking to do is limit these proposals specifically around the external footprint on the terraced areas and specifically around the addition of 6 more doors, which will lead to increased levels of noise.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, the applicant is represented. Are they here? Mr. Chichester, you're here. So in similar fashion, you've got up to 3 minutes as well to address these points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Good afternoon, members. My name is Rob Chichester. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and a Director at C2J at Chartered Town Planning and Architectural Practice. Today I'll be representing my clients, Kensington Roof Gardens, regarding the retrospective application for variations to the extant planning and listed building consents to the Sun Pavilion at Kensington Rooftop Gardens. The rooftop gardens have been the subject of over £60 million worth of investments over the last 3 years, which has accumulated in the sensitive restoration of one of Europe's most historic and iconic listed rooftop gardens. The applications before members include several minor variations to the previously approved Sun Pavilion building on the 6th and 7th floor. The applicant's agents has worked proactively with the council, and the amended plans presented before the committee now reflect all the agreed amendments. As highlighted in the committee report, the majority of the statutory and internal consultancies have offered no objection to the proposal. Of those consultancy responses, it is key to note that following a site visit in October last year, Historic England raised no objection to the variations as built. Again, the Council's Conservation and Design team have offered no objection to the variations as built and confirmed the works would preserve the special architectural and historic interest and heritage significance of this Grade 2 listed building and Grade 2 listed park and garden. In addition, the scheme would preserve the character and appearance of the Kensington Square Conservation Area. In terms of the objections raised by the Kensington Square Residents Association and local residents, I would echo the salient points highlighted in the professional officer's report. Specifically, the proposed works to the 6th and 7th floors have been reviewed by the Council's Conservation Officer and are considered acceptable. These works have not harmed the surviving special architectural and historic interest of the Grade 2 listed building. The internal alterations would not lead to significant intensifications of the use. The use has been established as a members club and is not proposed to increase the size overall in terms of the footprint. Permission can be sought retrospectively, and the retrospective application process allows applicants to regularise works. On balance, the proposals have been found to be acceptable. The proposed scheme before members meets the key principles outlined in National Planning Policy Framework, the London Plan, the Local Plan and the Supplementary Planning Guidance documents adopted by the Council. In light of my previous comments, the detailed committee report and recommendation, I would respectfully invite members to support their professional officers and their recommendation to grant approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, our chance to ask questions of either party. Who would like to go first? Well, you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the applicant. You have, the roof garden is quite a big endeavor, so I'm pretty sure in bringing it to this standard, you sought planning application for most of it. What I don't understand is why these bits are retrospective now. Why did you build this without getting agreement first? That's my first question.
So in answer to your question, Councillor, as pointed out, in terms of retrospective works, the planning process allows you to apply for retrospective works on site. Inevitably, with a project of this scale and size, we're talking about a £60 million project on there. During the process, there are minor amendments that occur at times in terms of doors, etc. These are only minor variations. Again, in terms of, we talked about there was a minor sort of increase in terms of the 7th floor canopy itself. These are design works and technical works that come out when you are doing the detailed works on this. So these do happen. However, it's key to note that during those process, the applicant did undertake professional advice from ourselves as professional agents and town planners on there, and also conservation specialists before undertaking the work.
But didn't get permission for it. You didn't know whether it's permittable or not. But I'm going to move on to my second question. Is now that it's built, and you can see from the residents' perspective, they're very concerned about the noise. And granted, you have that many people in a rooftop outside that will create and generate a lot of noise, especially if you have music playing inside. My question is, what are you doing to mitigate that, and how are you going to control and manage the noise will not actually disturb the residents in the area? Thank you.
So in terms of noise disturbance, there is an operational management plan in place which is secured as part of the original planning consent and is conditioned on there. Again, like I said, in terms of the club use itself, there is a license in place which is a separate legislation, but that does limit the number of people entering the club and the hours of operation. That's a separate legislation that doesn't form part of the plan application. It is also, material to this determination that there has been extant use for the club for in perpetuity for over 20 years.
May I add a comment to that, or am I not allowed to?
No, I'm afraid you have to wait until you're asked a question. Kasim.
Thank you, Chair. My question to the objector. We as a council, obviously, when we make decisions, we have to balance and make sure that development happens in the borough as well as listening to residents and to make the best possible decision for the residents. So coming back to the noise, that is what I've heard from you, and that's what I've read from the objectors in the application form, as well as light pollution. Obviously, it's been mentioned already that when it comes to the licensing and the use of the building itself is covered in the licensing, under the licensing agreement, and the licensing that has been given, the time, the hours, and the location. But what is suitable to the residents, what you can, without saying we're completely against it, is there a way you think we can get these residents to agree that you're representing? And also when it comes to the light pollution, when it comes to the noise pollution, what will be your take on this?
Thank you for the question. And of course, you're completely right. RBKC has a duty to encourage and promote business in the council, and that's something that we certainly support. And we are generally supportive of the roof gardens. That being said, the use of the garden for outside activity and the preservation of the garden were key discussion points at the original planning appeal. And so what we're saying is we're supportive of the program inside the club. Outside of the club, where it encroaches on a residential area, that needs to be limited. And so we're saying that go ahead with everything inside the club, but the addition of the doors and the addition of the additional seating area is something that should be limited. And furthermore, critically, the operating plan doesn't envisage the increased intensification of this outdoor seating area. So there is no operating plan currently in place for that. So I would be saying if it's going to be approved today, it should exclude the doors, it should exclude the outdoor seating area, and we need a proper operating plan for that, which limits sort of the noise levels at a period when I must add that the club's looking to increase its membership to 3,000-4,000 members. So this is going to lead to a very, very significant increase in the outdoor noise levels.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that response. The question of the outdoor, that's what I was referring to. The main reason in terms of sunlight and in terms of people having an outdoor roof, it's to have that outdoor feel, and I think that's part of the business. I'll ask the question to the representative of the applicant. But the question is there a timeline you would suggest or would accept as a resident, rather than completely, I'm finishing the question, rather than completely saying no outdoor seating, which is definitely, if the applicants want to do indoor seating, they would never have applied for the planning to do the outdoor, so completely missing the point. Is there any time limit you would, or the weekend, or let's say 9 o'clock in the evening until then, or just keep...
You have the outdoor area, which we're not contesting, which is in the Spanish Garden and the Tudor Garden at the back. So those are away, and so there's plenty of seating area there. I think what we're really talking about is we're talking about the balcony on the west side. I don't know if we can see the map, where you've got on the 7th floor and the 6th floor, you've got seating areas which are very close, and there's no barrier there between them and the residents. So what we would be looking for is additional protection there. Well, maybe on the photo where you've got the photograph, I think, of the roof, the eagle eye view. I think it may be the next photo, that one. So you see on the left-hand side, you can see that's the area that's overlooking where all the residents live, and that's where they're proposing to have these additional seating areas. I think if there's lighting there, it should be pointing into the club, not out of the club, and there shouldn't be lights sort of over the balcony. And if there's noise control, you know, it should be limited after 9 p.m.
Thank you very much.
That doesn't prohibit them from using the whole of the back end of it.
Thank you. Chair, if you allow me to ask this question to the applicants, representative of applicants, the same goes for you in terms of timing and in terms of the use of the roof. As we said before, we definitely not against development, but what we also have to take into mind is the residents' well-being and their privacy, the light, everything else that comes with it, their living standard. So is there a way for the applicant that you're representing can reduce the timing or the numbers of people who can be there, so the light pollution will not affect, as well as noise pollution for our residents?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's just quite imperative to clear this is for a planning application for the amendments to a building rather than the licensing element, which controls the numbers, controls the hours, etc. in relation to the building. It would be omissive for me to comment on those because it doesn't form part of this application. The application itself relates to minor amendments to the building, to the extant planning consent, which is being consented. And in terms of the, especially the extension of the 6th and 7th floor canopies themselves, it doesn't relate to seating on there. There is no seating proposed on the plan at the moment. It is actually the building we're looking at, and those are the physical elements. And the assessment then comes down to whether or not they preserve or the listed building. The assessment within the officer's report is quite clear in that sense, that it does address those elements. And I appreciate there are concerns from neighbours in terms of the operational management plan, which forms a separate matter. Again, in terms of the hours of operation, which forms a separate matter. And in terms of the use, which is an extant use, which doesn't form part of this application. So I think it's just imperative that we concentrate on the planning grounds of this, because in terms of the other elements, it's omissive for me to comment on those elements because I'm not providing the licence in itself. I'm just the planning agent providing in relation to the works that we're seeking retrospective approval for.
I think that's a fair answer question, but yes, we know the difference between the licensing and the planning, and that point is very, very clear. What we're doing today is to give the permission or not to give, simply because the usage you can later on apply for the licensing. That's different, completely different matter, but what we're trying to do here is to give that alternation grant application to make sure that the residents are not harmed. But thank you, that was very clear.
Thank you, Chair. Question to Mr. Applicant, Mr. Chichas. Could you briefly elaborate why there were unauthorized alterations over the past that you've been undertaking? Is that why there's a planning application done? Also, in terms of the external doors on the 7th floor, is that in order to have that accessibility for the members to enjoy the outdoor view, or is that what's the intention behind it, or is it just purely because of the planning consideration? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, I missed your first part of the question. I'll answer the second part in terms of this.
Well, I understand there were unauthorized planning works,
Yep.
alterations, so could you, I wouldn't say justify, but
Justify.
elaborate a little bit? Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, so in line with my response to Councillor earlier, the retrospective works have been subject to, just in terms of when the original design was created on there have been some changes during the design process on there. In terms of the extra doors on the 7th floor, which are onto the balcony itself, the extant planning consent allows you to move around that balcony anyway. They are just additional doors which will allow movement of people in and out of the building. And again, in terms of just moving people in and out of the balcony areas, there's not just one area. There is also fire implications to take into consideration. However, like I said, it doesn't change the fact the extant consent allows you to move around that balcony on the 7th floor, just provides an additional door in and out of the building at that part. And that goes along with the operational element of the building, which has changed over time because it does internally, which then, again, has an impact on the plans at a later date.
Thank you.
So
Chairman, if I can ask...
Can I correct two
Yeah,
inaccuracies?
I'm coming back to you.
Sorry, you can't speak now.
Thank you for your answer. I'll just probably check with the objectives. You just heard that's an additional door on the 7th floor. In terms of, it's just an extra piece of, accessibility for the members to have an easy flow in and out. Could you elaborate? I mean, you spoke about the living conditions, regardless of the extra door, that would anyway happen. So could you just please justify? Thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify two inaccuracies there. The 6th floor does have seating, some seating on it already, and the 7th floor will have seating on it because the intention is to put a restaurant there. And therefore the idea is that you have more seats if you have outdoor space. The purpose of these doors is so that they can serve more people outside, particularly at night time. And so, again, our view is, do the food and beverage inside or at the rear gardens. Doing it on these terraces is going to increase. There is no justification. The second inaccuracy is there are plenty of fire escapes throughout the building on all 4 sides that you see, and therefore this isn't a fire escape. This is people sitting outside, drinking and eating late into the night.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone. So, colleagues, our chance to speak to officers. I think the first point I'd just like to be clear about is with officers. I know a lot of people don't like retrospective applications, but in planning terms, that's something that is simply not a consideration. Is that correct? So
yes.
we're not allowed, we shouldn't take that into any sort of consideration.
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Right. And also, talking about the doors and seating, I don't see in the description of the application that there's any reference to additional seating. Presumably that's not part of the application.
Yeah, so the seating itself wouldn't require planning permission. It would be obviously subject to separate licensing agreements. But what sort of members should be clear on is the amendments to the approved scheme. So there is an approval for a terrace at the 6th and 7th floor levels. It's just whether the increase in size of that terrace, if members think that would have an acceptable impact on the living conditions of residents.
Other questions? Wala and then Arian.
Thank you. Well, the retrospective is an issue before me because it's an attitude of I'll build and then we'll deal with it later. But so I'm just putting it on record that it is an issue. However, my question is, can we put recommendation of time in this application? Can we recommend a time whereby any use of the terrace at night is terminated, i.e. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever? Can we do that?
I don't think we would be able to, just because...
As a condition?
Just because the parent permission didn't actually include the time limit, so I don't think we can introduce that. I'll just divert to Fiona on that point.
I agree that it wouldn't be reasonable to add another condition given the scale and nature of the change. And then Lorna Bowery has just suggested a change to the OMP, but even that...
Sorry, Jim, it wasn't so much that as that paragraph 6.21 of the report was amended by the addendum report, and it was referencing the OMP. So in the addendum report, it was just basically saying that there was already an OMP in place, and it sets out the operational hours of use of the space already. Under the matters that you can see in the addendum report, overall trading hours, I gather there's already one in existence which deals with these sort of
Yes.
things.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to draw your attention to the addendum report.
Okay, this one. So that means if there is any time constraint for the use, it has to come from licensing. We can't do anything. Okay, let me go back and ask you a different question then. What can we do, or how do we know that our residents are not adversely affected by the noise from these terraces? What's in our power aside of licensing?
I think that's the planning judgment you need to make this evening. So officer's recommendation is that there is this fallback position and existing permission for a terrace in that location. The increase in size over and above what's already been approved, we don't think is so material that it would cause harm to neighbours, that change. And so that's kind of the planning judgment you need to reach. Do you agree with officers that the change is okay? Bearing in mind you may not have, may have had concern with the principles around the terrace, but that's established and done and approved. So that's kind of the question we're asking you this evening to make a decision on.
If we refuse this evening, what do? They go and build up the space?
We would have to give due regard to the decision you come to when we're considering, planning enforcement going forward. But we would recommend approval for this application as officers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Gavin, just a question. I know, so regardless of the increase of membership, they would have unconditional rights to the access to the outdoor space. Is that understanding correct?
It's not completely unconditional because the original permission did have this operational management plan, right, to try and improve the situation and safeguard living conditions. But yeah, so it's not unconditional, but we just can't put a number. It wouldn't be reasonable to add lots more conditions or prohibit it more under this application. That's our advice to you.
Right. I know, it's technically not a planning condition, but I'm sure the licensing could step in if it's excessive in terms of seatings or the numbers.
I will offer no comment on that just because I can only give you planning advice.
Yeah,
you're probably, greater knowledge than I have on that.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's the thin line between the planning and licensing. And to the officers, I'm sure you have considered what we can suggest in terms of conditions that we can put or conditions we cannot put. Yes, when it comes to this stage, for me is what can we do, as Councillor Idris said, for the residents and the life of our residents. But at the same time, we cannot put conditions on licensing issue where, but is there a way you can carry a message to the licensing team or any, I won't say recommendation to it because we're not in a position to put recommendation, but we would like to know if this will impact the lives of our residents rather than just giving them a go-ahead without any further conditions added. Is there any way that we can make sure that the living conditions of our residents are not impacted as it stands at this moment?
I think it's really difficult for you this evening because this application is just for quite specific works to the building. So you're not considering the use itself. There is a knock-on implication that the terraces are getting bigger, so more people could stand on it. But it's not such a substantial change, in my opinion, that the covers would suddenly substantially increase. So I think we are in that, we would just bring you back again to the significance of the building, and you can consider living conditions. And if you think that increase in the terrace is so great that it would allow so many people over and above that it would be harmful, that would be a reasonable conclusion. But I think it's a finely balanced one in that what's there at the moment and what's been allowed, the change isn't huge in that sense.
Okay, thank you. So we need to... Did you have another question?
Thank you, Chair. Just checking on the operational management plan. I'm sure health and safety is a big factor. I mean, I've been to roof gardens where they didn't allow me because it was either overcrowded or, the space was quite full. Would the planning consider the operational management plan when determining the either approval for the approval? Do we consider the operation management plan, or is just extra ancillary to?
Sorry.
I'm not sure the operational management plan has any details on sort of, it doesn't have a cap on numbers specifically. So what it has is suggestions on how they'll manage the number of people coming in and the flow of people and how when they leave and come to the property, bookings, things like that. But it doesn't sort of have a cap on numbers because then you get into the realms of planning enforceability. And so if you have a condition that's that specific, it's so hard to enforce. You'd have to be out there with a clipboard. So it's, again, that thin line that you described between planning and licensing.
Thank you.
So we need to make a decision on this. I think it's important to remember that we're talking here about something really, really quite a narrow matter relating to the building. Okay, the operation of the premises is already dealt with in an existing permission. It's also a licensing matter, and also there are environmental health legislation if there seems to be excessive noise from anywhere, a restaurant or a club or whatever. This is a very narrow, specific matter about adjustments to the building. As I said, the fact it's retrospective is not a planning ground to refuse it, and we should dismiss that from our minds, I think is the phrase, isn't it? I would suggest that this should be considered acceptable. Obviously, there's a listed building consent that goes with this planning permission. Is there anyone who'd wish to put a counter view to that?
Not a counter view as such, but a recommendation from me to the objectors to maybe pay attention to the licensing when it comes and put your effort there so you can control the time.
Well, thank you. Well, that's really a comment. I have a strong suspicion that people who live near the roof gardens in Kensington Square probably keep a fairly close eye on it. So I think that's probably very likely. So the recommendation on the planning permission is to grant. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? So that's agreed. And there is a listed, excuse me, there's a listed building consent that goes along with this planning application. Can I see those in favour of granting listed building consent, please? So that is also agreed. Okay. Thank you. If we can now move on to the next pair of applications, again, a planning permission and an associated listed building consent. Gabby, back to you to introduce those reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for planning permission and listed building consent for internal alterations to the 5th floor only. So I've kept this presentation quite short. I've included just a single slide just showing the floor plan for the 5th floor level for members to consider. The internal alterations include the removal of internal partition walls, changes to stairs, provision of steps, and changes to the internal doors. The proposed works have been reviewed and assessed by the Council's Conservation Design team and are acceptable for the reasons set out in the officer's report. The proposed works do not actually require planning permission as they are purely internal, but they have been applied for anyway. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Sterling, do you have particular comments you would wish to make about this application?
Sorry, just to clarify, is this relating to application 27 and 28, which relates to Esme's, or just so we know what we're talking about here? Okay, so this is the one with the internal changes to the light. Oh, yeah. So.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, you're quite right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So look, few comments on this. Our concerns relate to the external noise, less to the internal noise. However, we would make the point that clearly this is just the second example this evening of the applicant asking for forgiveness after the event rather than asking for permission. I think as a grade 2 listed department store, it was noted in the report that it was planned and built according to the American horizontal system, and the introduction of a new, more centrally located linked staircase between the 5th and 6th floor is at odds with this established approach. I think the RBKC report states it's regrettable that works were carried out on site. I think the key point here, and it has relevance to the previous and the next two applications that we're going to discuss, is that this proposal will lead to an intensification of the club, since it's a precursor to the club creating an internal meeting area, conferencing, and a library area on the 5th floor, which it's in the process of doing. So so essentially, as they increase towards 4,000 members, they will be intensifying. And so I think that's just something that needs to be borne in mind, again, with respect to the external disturbance.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chichester.
Thank you, Chair. I won't do my introductions again. I think you know me by now. On there, just the application for members just includes several minor variations. The previously approved layout of the 5th floor includes amendments to the stairwell link, which was already approved, the partition layout, and the ducting within the pre-existing service run. Again, we've worked with the authority proactively, and the amended plans presented before you now reflect all the agreed changes. There has been no objection from any statutory, internal or external consultantee. And again, following a site visit from Historic England, they raised no objection. And turning to the conservation and design team, they again have offered no objection to the variations as built and confirmed the works have not harmed the surviving special architectural and historic interest of the Grade 2 listed building. Again, in terms of the objections raised, the use has already been approved in the extant consent on there. The numbers relates to separate legislation and licensing. And in terms of the intensification, like I said, there is an established use for a members club on the 5th floor. Again, I would just point to the officer's report, which clearly outlines that the proposal meets the key principles of NPPF, London Plan, Local Plan, and the supplementary planning documents adopted by the Council. So like my previous comments, again, I would welcome and respectfully invite members to support the authority's professional officers' view in recommending approval.
Okay, thank you very much. So questions. I'd actually like to ask the first question myself. If I can ask the objectors, Mr. Sterling and your colleague, there's a letter which is from the Residents Association, which is copied. So I'm just trying to make certain I've got it. It's copied to all of the various applications, and it shows. Sorry, I'm just trying to get it right at the end. It shows a building where there are lights on effectively right across. Is that the 5th floor that we're discussing? Have I got that right?
Yeah, I don't know if you can refer to the specific page number, but I think I know what you're talking about. I think the that photo is taken on the 5th floor, you're correct, and currently it's being used as a staff cafeteria. Right. And there are lights which basically shine 24 hours a day onto the residence area, onto the square. We had to ask the club to essentially put in blinds and blackouts, which we believe they've done, but they don't actually get used. So that area, I can't comment whether that area will be used for expansion as a club member area or not. I know that they're going to be expanding the club into the 5th floor. They're going to be doing conferencing, doing club facilities there. Whether or not that will include an area overlooking the residence, I don't know.
If you just bear with me, colleagues. So can I ask Mr. Chichester, this is the final page of the Residents Association letter, which is attached to all of the applications. It does. They've got a line of windows which seem very, very lit. Is that photograph actually out of date? And the second thing is the photographs below, and obviously it sounds as though these are actually internal area. They're not open to members of, well, they're not open to members, never mind members of the public, but it does look quite utilitarian as sort of benches that members of staff might, be resting or that sort of thing. Are there any comments you can make about that?
Yes, Councillor. If I could ask Gabby if there's any chance you could put the plan up of the 5th floor, if possible, on there. In terms of the photos themselves, I can't really comment on if they are recent or not, because there's no stamp date on them. However, we are aware that separate discussions have been held with Residents Association and the operators in terms of those windows and the in terms of providing the blackout blinds, etc. on there. But yes, you're correct in saying they are the staff element and sort of that not open to members at that area, which is in the central part of it. But there are other parts of the existing fifth floor layout that will be open to members and conferencing rooms, etc., which are shown on the plans. I think it's sort of important to note that there were tenants in the building up until 12 months ago, which were, I think it was Warner Brothers, to my recollection, on there, who could have used the rooms at any time in a similar fashion on there. We haven't removed the lighting or changed the lighting on that floor in that sense.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. Okay, I think in truth that's probably a bit of a side issue, but it's just I thought it was quite a striking thing from the point of view of people who lived near the building. Any questions about this? No. Okay. All right. Any questions to officers?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my interest is the windows that are lit, and is it recently or is it up to date? Obviously, the agent couldn't answer that. So, is there any chance one can answer from the officers?
I mean, from our side, we don't have any sort of time-stamped images of the lighting or any kind of recent complaints about it that we could provide members with.
I think we probably need to leave that. In a way, my fault for raising it, I suspect, to be honest. Any other questions to officers? No? Okay. Thank you. Well, in that case, again, an application that's really quite narrow in scope relating to the building. The recommendation, Planning Permission, is to grant the application. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? So that is agreed. And the associated listed building consent, can I see those in favour of granting that? So that is also agreed. Thank you. If we can now move on to the next application in the pack, and this is agenda item N40 and N41, and planning permission reference is 25-00027, and there's an associated listed building consent. So, Gubby, again, can you introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission and listed building consent for external and internal alterations to Dully's Villa, also known as Esme's, in the Woodland Gardens, along with the retention of air conditioning units. The external alterations include low-level lighting, replacement windows, and the installation of a flue, and the internal alterations include the addition of a kitchen at the ground floor level. This slide shows the location of the villa, which is located within the Woodland Garden and is denoted by the red circle above. This is the existing villa for context. This slide shows the existing floor plans and elevation. This slide shows the proposed plans and elevation, and members will note the kitchen at the lower floor plan, and the flue on the roof plan. This slide shows a view of the roof where the flue has been installed. The officer recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions and reasons set out in the officer's report, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sterling, do you have any comments on this application?
Yeah, well, I think we're going back to the same theme here. This is the third case of doing the work, not getting the approval. I would say the recurring issue here is external noise and external light. No acoustic report. For some reason, no acoustic report's been provided, which would be very normal in a commercial operation like this. And I don't believe there's any proposal of double glazing or any sound protection here. So, and then in terms of the light, there's no proposal on shutters. Given that this building overlooks residence houses with young children, elderly people looking into their bedrooms, there's no shutters proposed. So we think that to the extent it's even to be considered, it should be subject to further undertakings that require double glazing, soundproofing, light shutters that have to be used at night, and it should only be used to private dinners and not as a restaurant. There was reference in the application that it could be used as a restaurant, which is particularly in breach of what is in the license. The license is very clear that this can only be used for private events, and we want that to be stated very clearly. And furthermore, finally, given the expansion of the terraces, we should stipulate that a fourth condition is that should not be used for external drinks in the garden. As you can see, if you look at the map that we just looked at, it's in the middle of the woodland garden. There should not be allowed any external drinks out there, which again is a condition of the license. So we want to make sure that's clear, and that's clearly specified in this discussion.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chichester, do you have any comments that you'd like to make about this?
Just to reiterate again, obviously the plans that are presented in front of members be subject to proactive discussions with the local authority and now reflect all the agreed amendments. No objection from the Conservation Department on there. And in terms of their, I think it's crucial to remember that there is an extant planning consent to utilise the building as private dining on both floors on there. Whilst we recognise that there are internal changes to include a kitchen in there and private dining on the first floor, in essence you would be reducing covers within that building on there. Again, there has been a reduction in glazing on the building, and now we are retaining its existing facade on there. So it has had an extant use on there, and we are just maintaining that use, just amendments to externally and internally on there. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, anyone? No. Okay. So in other words, the description is that it is going to be first floor private dining area, and that's essentially what this villa is within the grounds is going to be used for. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct on their private dining.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, questions to officers about this?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you, Chair. My first question is, have we conditioned noise? How much noise there is allowed to come from there? One. My second question is the use clearly stated of this unit? And my final question, do we have any target or any control over numbers? Is it conditioned that how many, there is a maximum of people to use the space?
So taking your sort of first question on the noise levels, so we've recommended our standard noise conditions for the air conditioning unit, so that if in the event that residents can hear the plant, or if it's sort of perceptible, they would be required to turn it off until they can comply with the council's noise levels. And then in terms of the use of the space, so there is consent for the villa to be used as sort of dining space in the planning history, but also to kind of reassure neighbours, we have recommended in condition 4 that an operational management plan will be sort of updated and submitted to and approved by the local planning authority before the villa can be in operation as a dining space.
one final question. Do you have concern at all about the size of the kitchen, the change? Because it changed from something very small, very intimate, to something to cater for a group of people. Do you have any concerns about that?
So the size of the kitchen, if I just pull up the plan, it's quite modest in size when you look at the lower ground floor level, so you can see that it occupies sort of half of that lower ground floor space. So I think in theory you could, maybe only 1 or 2 people could cook in that, and then bring the food up to the upper floor plan. So I think from our perspective it's quite a small dining space, so the noise generated from it probably could be managed by the updated OMP.
My question is external light is to do with external lighting, and I understand within the application form this has been now secured light pollution and in condition 2. Can you give further details on this, please, so that no light pollution will be impacting the surrounding residents because of their well-being and their, that's the place there for them to rest. People may come there and enjoy a good time and then leave, but our residents, what will be the impact on the light pollution on that? And give me more details about the condition 2 attached to it. Thank you.
So in terms of the light pollution, the lighting that would be installed around the villa would be quite low level. So officers have taken the view that, because I guess given the existing context and the built-up environment that it's situated in, and given the low level of the lighting, we wouldn't have any objection to lighting being installed. But if members were concerned about sort of the levels of light pollution, we might be able to include it in the management plan as an option if members were worried about that.
So what sort of things were you thinking of there? What Kazim, what kind of we need to check that this is something we would be able to do, because obviously conditions have to meet all the tests for conditions. What are you thinking that the light pollution?
Thank you, Chair. When I was reading the application, it said it's been secured on condition 2, and that really prompted my question. It has now been secured. If the light has been dealt with the issue, I don't think there's any other condition to add it, but I just want to double check if it's been secured, so no lighting pollution will be impacting the local residents.
So was your question relating to condition 2 and whether that includes, yeah, so that only includes acoustic levels from the air conditioning units, just so members are clear, it doesn't include light pollution. Oh, on the list of building consent, sorry. Yes, that includes the external light fittings, but that's more in terms of the impact on the listed building rather than impacts on the residents.
Well, in that case, excuse me, I think can make a decision about this set of applications. So it's recommended that planning permission is granted for this application. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. And on listed building consent, the recommendation is to agree listed building consent. Can I see those in favour? So that is also agreed. Thank you. If we can now turn to the application, the pair of applications which are recommended for refusal. So these are the ones that are agenda items 42 and 43. The planning permission is the one that starts PP 24006320 and the associated listed building consent. Now, I think I'm just going to check with officers. Lorna, because these are recommended for refusal, I think Mr. Chichester gets to speak first. Is that correct?
That's right, Chairman.
Yes. Okay. So, so Mr. Chichester, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Again, like I said, I won't go through the introductions on there, but as pointed out earlier, the rooftop gardens have been the subject of over £60 million worth of investment over the last 3 years, which has accumulated in the sensitive restoration of one of Europe's most historic and iconic.
Sorry, can you just bear with us a second? Sorry.
I'm not actually sure. We skipped the presentation.
Oh yes, sorry. I'm sorry. You're sorry.
It's an addendum report. So
Sorry, and also actually no. My apologies, everyone. That was my fault. Yes, because I think there's an important aspect of the addendum report, in fact, which you probably want to start with. Okay. So, Gabi, if you'd like to introduce.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to provide a verbal update for members this evening. Since publication of the addendum report, officers would like to raise that new applications have been received at the site for a number of the unauthorised works which are listed in the enforcement notice. It is important for officers to consider these applications on their own merits, and it would be premature to serve a comprehensive notice whilst these applications are live. And so officers would like to delete recommendation 2 relating to enforcement and the associated enforcement notices set out in both reports, and officers will subsequently consider any relevant action once all outstanding applications are determined, including the ones before you this evening. I'd also like to draw attention to the officers' addendum report. This is an application for planning permission and listed building consent for alterations to both the Spanish and Woodland Gardens at the Kensington Roof Gardens Private Members Club. This application is recommended for refusal on the basis of harm to the designated heritage asset and due to the loss of the landscaped areas around the garden. Due to the number of works which have taken place, I've included a site layout plan on this presentation, as it helpfully shows the areas which have been affected within the gardens highlighted in red. For information and context, the Spanish Gardens is shown in the top right-hand corner, and the Woodland Gardens is shown at the southern end of the plan. This slide is the aerial view which we presented earlier, which shows the positioning of the gardens. The Spanish Gardens is shown where my cursor is, at the bottom of the screen, and the Woodland Gardens is shown where the pavilion area is, just over here. I've included this slide as well as it shows the original plans of the gardens, which members may find useful. And I've included a short summary slide so members can see the alterations which have been carried out. And I've included photographs and site layout plans identifying where each of these alterations have taken place for ease. So starting with works to the loggia, which is located on the western side of the Spanish Gardens, where my cursor is here. These works include cladding to the original staircase with marble. The previously approved scheme included approval for sensitive repairs to this structure. However, the works have included cladding to the original stairs, wall and floor with marble, along with the removal of a bay with railings and a metal staircase installed. The photographs of the existing steps are included in the officer's report. And this slide shows the metal staircase which has been installed. Other works include the recladding and relining of the canal, with there being no details provided for officers to make an assessment. Furthermore, 4 large decks have been installed, as shown on the photograph on the right-hand side, and additional paving stones in the canal have also been installed. Works have also been undertaken at the Cobble Court, which is shown in the top right-hand corner, where my cursor is here. The works which have taken place include a bar which has been installed, along with raised timber decking. This photograph on the right-hand side shows the original Cobble Court without the decking installed, and the well, which has been removed. This slide shows the bar which has been installed, which includes a sloped roof and has been installed along with the timber decking on the left-hand side, but it's been covered in carpet in this photo, but you can see the decking just underneath it, with the cobble underneath. This slide shows the location of the central garden walls where other works have been undertaken, and this relates to the centre of the Spanish Gardens here. and the photograph on the right-hand side shows the original walls. This slide shows the replaced walls, which have now been boxed out and slightly increased in height and include temporary replica tiles. And this slide shows the original colonnade, which has been replaced. Officers do not object to the retention of the colonnade as a whole. However, it's been reinstalled with a perspex roof, which is considered to be out of character with the gardens. A picture of the perspex roof has been included at figure 15 of the officers' report. And then moving on to the woodland garden changes, these are summarised as follows. In terms of works to the western pond, which is identified on the plan as just over here as you enter the woodland gardens, another freestanding deck has also been installed, which is identified on that site layout plan. And then this slide includes the paving, which has also been installed without consent outside of the pavilion area, and has also been installed further into the garden, which is identified here. So on this side of the plan. And then this slide includes works which have been undertaken to the streams within the garden. Members will note they've been relined, and the rockery elements of the banks have been raised, which is sort of evident from the low levels of the water within the streams. This slide shows the reorientation of the Japanese bridge. Its replacement is accepted by officers, but the installed position doesn't match the submitted drawings. These applications are recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in the officer's report, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chichester. Apologies for...
no problem. Thank you.
Got, up 3 minutes.
Following a robust assessment of the committee report, we have raised our professional concerns with the applicants regarding the content of the report and its potential to materially mislead members and the public, which in turn would impact on the committee's decision-making process. The report before members portrays an unreasonable picture in regards to the rationale behind the scope of works that fall within the remit of this application. The report fails to mention the extensive and length the applicant has gone to try and attempt to understand the Conservation Officer's concerns. Despite assurances from officers and numerous requests over an 8-month period, the Conservation team have not provided any formal observations or entered into any dialogue with the applicant's agents. Of concern is the use within the report of selective historic photographs that do not represent the condition of the building and gardens when the applicants took ownership of the site. The report and recommended enforcement action clearly references works that fall outside the scope of the application. The report does not provide members or the public with any analytic view whatsoever as to why said works are unacceptable or why enforcement action is justified. Furthermore, the Council are fully aware that a large contingency of the works referred to within the recommended draft enforcement notice are the subject of live applications currently under consideration by the Council. The live applications referred to are currently out for public consultation on the 30th of May and therefore cannot be lawfully determined until the consultation period closes. The inclusion of live applications within the report and proposed enforcement action again raises significant concerns in regards to the predetermination of said applications without due process. Given our grave professional concerns outlined above, the applicant has sought independent counsel's opinion from Landmark Chambers. Robert Walton KC has provided the following initial assessment, which is damning. I quote verbatim, "Further to our team's call yesterday, I have now had the opportunity to review the officer's report into the application PP 2406320. In my view, the OR is deeply flawed. In particular, members are being asked to take enforcement action on the basis of a very confusing report and without proper information as to why numerous works, some of which are the subject of live applications, would be unacceptable, why enforcement action would be taken. In my view, it is unreasonable for officers to ask members to act in this way. Considering the above-mentioned Council's advice, we respectfully request that members defer the applications of this committee and invite them to undertake a committee site visit. Should the Council proceed and determine the application as a committee, the applicants would have no other option than to seek to challenge any decision through the judicial review process and appeal against any enforcement notice. In line with our recent correspondence with the Council, we would stress that the applicants and the design team remain open to proactive discussions with a review of the specific scope of works, inclusive of potentially agreeing the removal and reinstatement of several of the current variations. It's our professional view that the premature pursuit of enforcement action is not in the public interest. We would encourage members to instruct their officers to re-engage with the applicant's agents and enter into proactive discussions, which would negate any lengthy appeal process and significant allocation of council resource and time at the public's expense. Considering my previous comments, I would respectfully invite members to defer the applications to allow meaningful discussion with officers to find an amicable solution and prevent any lengthy and costly appeal process.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So, Mr. Sterling, do you have comments on this pair of application?
I mean, I would again, this is the fourth example of the applicant blatantly ignoring RBKC and local residents. Let's just remind ourselves here, this is a Grade 2 star listed building. It's been around for 100 years, which we as a community have a fiduciary duty to protect. And I'm frankly, having read the report, I'm disgusted at the vandalism that's been caused here. If this was done in a house, building control would be all over this, and the owner of the house would have to reinstate it. I'm also, you know, it reminded me actually of a program, Rogue Traders or Cowboy Builders. You know, what's been done to this building and the gardens in it, which have been sort of damaged and destroyed. And I'm also disappointed and disgusted that nobody from Kensington Roof Gardens has had the courtesy to come here today to apologise, and that they've sent a paid consultant to threaten the council with legal action. It's frankly unacceptable, and I haven't heard an apology yet. In terms of the specifics here, let's look at the specifics here. You've got in the Spanish Garden, you've got new marble staircases which have been sort of carpeted all over the garden. On the Spanish Garden, you have 4 new large timber decks that have been laid over the flower beds, over the lawn, and basically destroying the greenery there, contrary to policy GB16 of the Local Planning Act 2024. In the Cobble Court, you've got a bar which has been erected, which is completely inappropriate for this setting. It's a beach hut that you would normally see on a beach in Margate or somewhere. It's been just put down here, and with shoddy replica tiles, and actually what's even more disappointing is that the well, the architectural well, has been dismantled and cast aside. You know, this is a relic of this community. And then finally on the Woodland Garden, you've got the bridge has been put in the wrong place. I mean, you can't make that up. And the stream, which has been put in, which quote-unquote exposes prominent bandlip of grey lining and ordered positioning of the rockery, is unsightly and at odds with the previous more discreet and informal character. It looks like a garden centre, frankly. So I think the council is right to reject this, and I would firmly urge all members of the committee to demand that everything is reinstated. You know, we can't have these historic monuments, you know, in our community and allow developers to essentially destroy it, and we simply accept that. So I would say reinstate it and put it back into its original previous condition.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, who'd like to go first on this? Actually, I'd like to start by asking Mr. Chichester. There are a lot of components here of different things which the officer's report suggests are unacceptable. Personally, I think that there might well be a reasonable argument to say many of them were rather modest matters. But I'd like to really draw your attention to I think it is in the Spanish Garden, where it's the canal area, where, so I'm just trying to find it in the report, so it's, okay, so in the report, this is pages 12 and 13, and page 12 has a photograph which is obviously taken quite a few years ago when I suspect there was probably no use going on of the space at all. But then on 13, this is as built, and I just feel that the extent of the decking does seem to me quite extensive in relation to what was originally there. Now, I can see an argument that says that the paving slabs which have been put into the lawn, possibly it could be argued actually don't require permission at all, in fact. But I think the decking, it's sort of covering up quite a large part of the garden. As I say, I say that in the context of, I think quite a lot of the things I would personally suggest might be really rather small matters. But I'm wondering if you have any response to that, which I think is the most important aspect of the officer's report in, discussing objection to it. I think all the microphones have failed, Mr. Johan. Mine is back on. See if yours works now. Well, my microphone seems to work, so I'll switch this off. Don't worry, I never touch anything like that when I'm in this chair.
It's back on.
Back on? Perfect. There we are. Councillor, you're referring to the 4 freestanding decks in the Spanish Garden. Again, like I said, in terms of the photos that have been provided on there, I think it's hard for me without the photos in front of you to illustrate the condition of that garden when the applicants when they took the ownership of the property itself. Now, look, they have installed those freestanding decks, but they are completely freestanding and reversible, so it can be brought back to exactly in terms of its original layout and the gardens. They do provide covers within the garden area, which are required to make the club economically viable, to be frank, within that Spanish Garden. Again, you're able to still appreciate the gardens when you stood within them, but they are, like I said, freestanding decks that can be removed, and the applicants will be happy to have a condition saying that they are to be removed when the custodians, if they leave the building, or the tenants leave the building.
Thank you for that. Colleagues, any other points? No? Okay, thank you. Well, in that case, our chance to question officers about this. You go first.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, if we agree with the officer's recommendation and refuse, will the applicant be required to return everything to its former state? or will they keep it as it is now?
What we've recommended is recommendation 2 to be deleted. So if you refuse this evening, it would be just these elements that you determine were unacceptable, and then the enforcement action that flowed from that would be up to officers, because there's quite a lot of other applications that have now been received, so it would be helpful to determine all of them before any formal action happens. It may be that the roof gardens, after hearing that conclusion from members, opt to make the changes themselves or put forward a revised scheme. So the exact action will depend.
But don't we have a duty to make sure things, especially that are listed, are respected in that sense?
I mean, officers agree. We are recommending refusal for this application. That doesn't mean sort of all change from what was there originally is unacceptable. We have to manage change appropriately. And, you know, there is an element of buildings need to be maintained and improved as they go on. But the things before you this evening under this application we are concerned about.
Can we put a recommendation then? To make sure, can we put a recommendation to make sure that things are put back to their normal state?
Well, actually,
yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Chairman. If the conclusion is that you agree with the officer's recommendation to refuse, you could put an informative to say the expectation is that there would be some action as a result. But we'd really need to look at it holistically to make sure it's expedient, just to line up with our enforcement plan as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'm just going to ask officers, I want to run past officers a couple of possibilities here that it'll be for us to consider and decide. The first option, clearly, is simply to agree with the recommendation to refuse planning permission, and by implication we would presumably refuse listed building consent for the reasons set out in the report. However, recommendation 2 relating to enforcement action has been deleted, so it would mean that nothing would happen immediately. And obviously it would be entirely reasonable for the applicant could then appeal the refusal. And in fact, it would be very unlikely and any enforcement action would be taken while an appeal was in process. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
I guess it depends on the outcome of the other applications and what action's taken, but we will look at it holistically, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. The second option is that we could decide that, and this would be sort of, I'd be inclined to do this, to say that many of the matters here were actually, we would view actually as being acceptable, but there was a reason for refusal relating to the canal, the matter I discussed earlier on. So it would be, the application would be refused, but for really something very specific, which that could then, well, take it from there. And the other option would be that we could simply decide that we felt that all of these things, they're obviously entirely internal to the roof gardens, that in fact we disagreed with the recommendation, and in fact we would end up with a resolution to grant. So that would be 3 options, and I just wanted to check that they were proper ones and that we could reasonably discuss that if members wish to go down any of those 3 routes.
Yes, absolutely, all reasonable options. With option 2, when you review which matters are acceptable and unacceptable, it would probably be best, if you do go down that route, to look at paragraph 4.1 of the report that kind of summarises all the different bits that it involves. so that officers are clear on what you're refusing and what you found to be acceptable. I think we'd need direction on that from you.
Well, yes, I mean that sort of second option, I would sort of slightly circumvent going down a great big list by simply saying I would home in on something quite specific that I felt really went too far and was unacceptable. But the various other things, I think I would suggest might be viewed as not really causing harm at all. I mean, for example, whether this Japanese bridge is in a slightly different position from where it was suggested on an original plan it was, I'm not really sure that's justification for a refusal. How do Fiona?
That's really helpful. I think the best way of doing it then is to vote on a narrowed down reason for refusal as a result of your discussions.
All right, yes.
That's probably the best way.
All right. Okay, so I have floated the idea of saying we should refuse permission in line with the recommendation, but the reason for refusal would be an extremely narrow one relating to the decking and that has been put by the side of the so-called canal area, and that would be the only reason for refusal. So the implication would be, if I can check with officers, the implication is that the other things would be granted, because we've not mentioned them in the reason for refusal. Fiona?
Yes, I think once you have the discussion and identify which, like if it was the decking, we could add that in. The only difficulty is you also have the landscaping reason for refusal that you'd need to discuss. So about the objection from our arboricultural team on the loss of the landscaping. So that's a bit more difficult, but...
Well, I think it's...
But I will leave it to you to discuss, and then maybe we can advise you.
I think it's really the decking, the extent of the decking, which completely changes that part of the space of the Spanish Garden, to my mind. I think perhaps, with guidance from officers, I think probably what we should do is let's have a vote and see, are we in favour of a recommendation that says permission is refused, but for that very narrow reason, as I have just discussed with Mrs. Ray and the other officers. It relates only to the decking that's on the so-called canal part of the Spanish Garden. Is everyone content that that's what we're considering? That I'm going to call a vote on that. So that the recommendation would be to refuse, but with that very, very narrow reason only. Can I? Yes, we could obviously decide. Well, I tell you what. Let's do it like this. Can I ask if people are minded to go along with that option that I've just outlined? The other options would be to accept the officer's recommendation with the list of all of the various items. The third option would be simply to grant, the implication would be to grant permission. So in other words, not to agree the recommendation at all. Maybe it's best if I go down the table and just take a sounding as to what order we might take this. So, Kasim, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. I understand the three points they've mentioned. My question to the officers will be, which is the best way to deal with this and the best advice to give us as councillors to make the decision based on what we have already agreed, what we have already discussed. But the question is, for me now, if we were to accept your recommendation, is there a way that applicant can come back and work with you and to deal with the specific areas that the chairman mentioned, or is it completely refusal from us? And once you have the decision, that is it. Is there a way to go back? I won't say deferral as being requested, but in a way to work together on this. Is there a way for this formula just before we made the decision? Can you answer that?
Absolutely, the applicant's free to come back and seek pre-application advice, submit new applications. We've got multiple new applications on the site because they've been divided up already. So it's within their gift. If we serve an enforcement notice, that's kind of when the discussions stop to a degree.
Okay, on that note, Mr. Chairman, I think it would be good to give that opportunity to the officers and for the applicants to come back if there is any issue to deal with, rather than us to making the decision to defy the applicant proposal as it stands now. I think that will be the way forward. And also it will protect the local area as has been requested, but most importantly, we are serving our residents as well as local businesses. So we have to strike balance on this.
So we can't hear you.
So I think Mr. Stray has suggested that we put the recommendation, the full officer recommendation as it is, to the vote, and see what happens from there. So can I see those in favour of the recommendation to refuse on the basis of the set out in the report? Can I see those against? Okay, so the recommendation is not adopted. Okay.
What I'd recommend now is that somebody proposes a recommendation to refuse by virtue of the scale and amount and the extent of the decking, rather than unauthorised work, and then you can keep the second reason as well relating to decking rather than all of the works. So I'd propose that, see how that goes down.
Well, I'm quite happy to do that. So I'm proposing that we do refuse the application, but on the basis, as has been discussed at length, really on the decking in this part of the Spanish Garden. And that's the only reason for refusal. Is that seconded? Was somebody seconded? So Councillor Aretti is seconds. Can I see those in favour of that resolution, please? Can I see those against? Okay, so that resolution is carried by 3 votes to 1. Councillor Idris voted against. Can we now move on to the listed building consent? Now, I think that the arguments, to my mind, would seem extremely similar here. So I think probably we should start by putting the recommendation of the officers for refusal to the vote. So can I see those in favour of the officers' recommendation for listed building consent? Can I see those in favour of that? Can I see those against? Okay, so that is not adopted. In similar fashion, I would like to propose the reason that listed building consent is not granted is, as we have just discussed, relating to the decking in the Spanish Garden. I'd like to propose that. Is that seconded by someone? Councillor Aretti seconds. Can I see those in favour of that resolution? Those against? So that is granted by 3 votes to 1. Again, Councillor Idris declined to support. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. I can't recall there being 4 pairs of applications relating to a property happening at a committee before. I apologise for that taking quite a long time. What I suggest now is that we take a short break. Councillor Hargreaves will come back to the table, and when we restart in a few minutes' time, he will take the chair because we will consider the application at 84 Abingdon Villas. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, we are ready to start again. So can you resume your places and then we can start again, please? So the next item on the agenda is 84 Abingdon Villas. Who is going to present that for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for alterations to an already approved permission which was allowed on appeal at 84 Abingdon Villas. The proposed amendments are to vary the approved shopfront, including the style of fenestration at the front elevation of the shopfront cafe. As there are no speakers for this case, there is no presentation. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and for the reasons set out in the officer's report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. As there are no speakers then for this application, go straight to the members. If you have any questions from the officers, please. Any questions? No questions. In that case, then, we shall go straight to a vote. It is recommended that the committee grant planning permission with the conditions listed in section 8 of this report. Will all those in favour please raise their hands? Any against? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. So we now turn to the application in Holland Park Road, and I think, Abby, that again is you're going to introduce.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the committee addendum report, which includes amendments to the officer's report and the reason for refusal in respect of conditions 11, 12 and 13. I've only included one slide for members so they can see the location of where the site is. In terms of context, originally permission was approved for the excavation of a single-storey basement below the footprint of the dwelling and reconstruction of the existing rear conservatory. This permission was granted subject to a set of conditions, of which 4 related to contaminated land, more specifically numbers 10, 11, 12 and 13. This application seeks to discharge those conditions. Of the submitted material, condition 10 is acceptable. However, conditions 11, 12 and 13 have been reviewed by the Council's contaminated land team and are not acceptable. This has resulted in the split decision for the reasons set out in the officer's report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, in this case, because the recommendation is to refuse, decline to agree the conditions, we ask, yes, to approve one, but I think the speaker is it Mrs. Hassan?
Yes, I'm here.
Ah, right. Okay. So please, when you're ready, you've got up to 3 minutes. Do go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ragda Hassan, and my husband and I are the owners of 7A Holland Park Road. We are representing ourselves today. I heard the officer's comments, and I would like to add some facts and scientific evidence to the case. We were granted our planning permission for basement development in September 2024. With that was attached very onerous 4 contamination conditions, one of them including is CLC1. In compliance with the preconditions, we commissioned the study by a professional contamination firm, Land Science, and the conclusion of that study is that we have the lowest risk of contamination in our property. The study specifically said that there is no need for soil sampling or boreholes drilled in the garden, given that the lowest risk of contamination. As a result, we applied to discharge all 4 conditions. On my road, Holland Park Road, and the cul-de-sac of the road, Samari Abbott's Terrace, there are 18 basement planning permissions granted. None of them, except 2, had any contamination preconditions attached to them. And these 2 had CLC3, which is a much lighter gas and vapor condition. These 2 properties conducted detailed studies and found the risk to be negligible, and that was approved by RBKC. In addition, 16 of these 18 properties have already dug their basements, and none of them reported any contamination, including number 5, number 3A, which are 10 meters to my right, and number 10, which is immediately across from my house. In addition, 11 Holland Park Road received their basement planning permission in January 2025, with no contamination preconditions attached to their planning permission. This house is 2 doors down from my house, about 50 meters away. The cost of the studies that are requested by RBKC is over £20,000, without absolutely no scientific foundation. In conclusion, given the consistent scientific evidence of negligible risk, the clear findings of the land science study of lowest risk of contamination and no need for further studies, the lack of contamination in nearby developments, I respectfully request the committee to discharge all contamination conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Colleagues, who would like to go? Wala, do you want to go first?
Chair, you said in your speech you had a study done and you showed it to the officers. Was it refused, the study?
No, the study was accepted, but based on which the officers said that that's why they want to discharge condition 10. However, the officers asked us to drill 9 boreholes in the garden that is 7 by 4.5 meters and requested 27 soil samples without absolutely no basis. And I should say also that when we had engaged with the council to clarify after the planning permission, they specifically mentioned that if condition 10 is fulfilled, and there no contamination found, there will not be any need for further studies. So we are very surprised that we are here today.
Thank you very much indeed. Arian, sorry, did you want to ask?
Just your report, obviously you've done your report. Is that in line with either the national policy or the local policy? And that concludes or justifies the report is acceptable for the basement? Thank you.
It is, and that's why it has been accepted by the officers. I also want to add that I have saved you the amount of angst and stress this has caused us on absolutely no basis, and there's no precedent in the council for these very onerous conditions, and it's completely disproportionate to the size of the development. But also, fundamentally, there's no reason to do further studies if the contamination risk is the lowest risk. So to answer your question, yes, it is, and I think that's why it's been accepted, and it's done by a professional firm that specializes in contamination studies.
Chairman, just to follow up, I understand, the condition are quite onerous. In regards to the nearby basement that you just mentioned, I guess probably number 5 and number 11, I believe. When during the basement planning, they didn't have any of these obviously the proximity would be less than 10 meters, I believe, with your proposed basement and the nearby basement. None of these conditions were applied to the local.
None of that has been applied. So I can tell you, imagine my house, to the right of my house, there is number 5A, Number 5, and number 3A, all of them had planning permissions. The only one that had any conditions associated with it was number 5A, and they have done the study and found the risk to be negligible. Number 11, which is 15 meters to the left of my house, was granted the planning permission 4 months after we were granted the planning permission with no contamination conditions, preconditions whatsoever. And I don't know on what basis.
Thank you, Ms. Hassan, for attending, and Salim for attending this meeting. Just a quick question about the cost. You've mentioned that that has been costing £20,000 plus for the conditions, and if you were to do the borehole and everything else. What about, you've mentioned the similar applications or residents have been given same but no conditions attached. Is the cost impacting you to do the job, or is it the length of the reports that's causing you stress?
The cost of these studies is prohibitive. This is about 10% of the cost of building a basement shell and core. It's completely disproportionate to the site and the history of the site and the contamination condition of the site. So of course it's caused us a huge stress. We were ready to move out, and this project has been we're waiting for this to do this for many years. I don't want to. I'm going to spare you the details, but it's been a long time coming, and we are spending almost all our resources on it. So for such a cost to be imposed on us with absolutely no scientific reason, it's really beyond onerous and very prohibitive, unjustifiable, emotionally damaging. I mean, the list can go on, and I find it quite, painful to have to go through that. I think you can hear that in my voice.
Okay. Discussion with officers. I'd like to start, actually. I must say, I do find this all, I think, onerous is the word that's been used a couple of times by the speaker. It does seem to me to be a tremendous burden in relation to what we're actually talking about, which is a residential building, a normal residential building. There doesn't appear to be any evidence that this used to be an heavy industrial site or something like that. I mean, it's across the way from Leighton House, so I would assume, going back, it would have been probably farmland, or it certainly, the idea this was some sort of heavy industrial area where having an enormous number of boreholes dug when sites that have got planning permission that are very nearby, these conditions were not even applied at all. I find that quite difficult, really, to see. I mean, do you have any comment about that, or was it a case of somebody else wrote the passages requiring all of this? Perhaps Fiona, you might like to speak to this.
I would welcome the opportunity, if you don't mind, Chairman. I'd asked similar questions when sort of checking and reviewing the report. Now, what officers have done have given considerable weight to the response from our colleagues in environmental health in the contaminated land team. And the purpose and the reason for the conditions that were agreed as pre-commencement conditions is all about minimising risk and managing the risk. And they've advised us it's not acceptable. Clearly, Mr. Hassan has a different view, and it's before members this evening. If you are satisfied, you can come to a different conclusion.
Thank you very much indeed. I think, colleagues, I would suggest that we might, on balance, come to a different conclusion. But Gerard, did you want to go first, and then
really just the report that the applicant produced? Did that? I mean, it's quite a hefty report, and seems to me to be done by a very reputable firm. Did that affect your decisions, your thinking? I mean, it's a difficult one, is this, you know, and this seems to be a very, very thorough report.
Absolutely, that's formed part of the application submission. Environmental Health have also reviewed it, but I think the comments we've got back is they would expect more in certain areas as it's set out in the report. And we've, as planning officers, not the technical experts, have had to look at both things and come to our conclusion based on what's in front of us, as you will need to do with your own planning judgment this evening. But it is a tricky one, I can understand.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, there must be a reason you think that particular land in that particular postcode needs that extra care to make sure it's healthy to build on.
No.
So what is that reason?
That is another good question. So in July 2024, we had our new local plan adopted, and it is very stringent, GB18, which is the policy relating to land contamination, and it asks almost in every circumstance for a preliminary risk assessment. And so that wasn't submitted with the original, so it was agreed it would be done by these conditions to overcome the concerns. Now we've got the preliminary risk assessment. Our environmental health colleagues have told us it's not enough to satisfy their concerns around risk. That's all we have.
Anything.
The new local plan is the trigger, but Ms Hassan is absolutely right that there's other permissions that have been granted and I believe built out successfully, and that has been a material consideration in it, but the conditions have been attached, they're there, and now we're at the point of discharge.
Were they built out before the new local plan?
Built out, yes.
And nobody died or had any serious problems?
No, I think it's just about risk mitigation, and my understanding from environmental health.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the new local plan, as you've mentioned, officers July 2024. But as Ms. Hassan mentioned, there was an application approved earlier this year. Mm-hmm. And for that, what is the difference significant that can cause an issue for potholes to be drilled in the backyard, in the basement, for one residence and not for other residents who's just been a couple of months back approved? Has there been any significant information, or is just the report has been published, and my colleague, Councillor Hargrave, mentioned a reputable organization firm has published? What is the difference? Why is it subjected to one for boreholes to be drilled while other have been given with no condition just 4 months ago?
I haven't seen any correspondence asking for a specific number of boreholes and tests, but again, Ms Hassan has explained that that's been asked of her at some point. So I don't think it was from planning officers, but I understand that's been asked for. The difference in the applications is a very key point, and this was something I went back to the case officer and asked, because my view is if we don't accept these details are acceptable, we should then be accepting an application to remove the condition, saying, you know, one's been approved down the road, which is a different piece of legislation, and we would justify that with a new decision that's come out of it, and we should give weight to that. But what's before us is this discharge application, and that's where the difficulty lies. So it might be that we have a different recommendation for you if it was a removal, but this discharge is in front of you this evening.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I mean, I must say, colleagues, I find this, I do find this excessive, and I really think that that our discussion now is about finding the correct formulation to say that we accept. That there are no further, that these conditions are discharged and that no further work is necessary. I think that colleagues, do you agree with that?
Actually, I agree, and I would say, I always say in planning, the officers are the mind of the occasion, and the councillors are the heart in this occasion. So I think we need to act accordingly.
So if I can go back to officers, so should we have a vote? Fiona, Lorna, should we have a vote to agree to discharge condition
you could
10?
do one at a time, Lorna's suggestion.
Because otherwise,
Right.
if you go against a recommendation, you'd be going against the approval of condition 10 as well. I think because this is a sort of a split decision, I think you're going to have to do one.
Yeah, vote on one, which is to approve, and then vote on 2 to refuse, and then propose if the outcome is what we expect it to be.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to be kept busy this evening with voting. I can see that. So the first vote is that we agree with the recommendation that condition 10 is discharged. Yes? Yeah. So can I see those in favour of that? So that is agreed. Moving on to condition 11, I would suggest that we also view that, well, so we have to, right, we need to put the recommendation, the officer's recommendation to that this condition is not discharged to the vote. So can I see those in favour of the recommendation to not, Okay, all right. So we can do 11, 12 and 13 together. All right, right. Okay, so I think what we should do is we need to first of all vote on the officer recommendation that conditions 11, 12 and 13 are not discharged. Can I see those in favour of that, please? Those against? Right, so the officer recommendation is not adopted. Can I propose a resolution that we decide that using our decision-making powers as members, that we've decided that on balance we feel that the condition should be considered as being discharged. Is that in order? Is that seconded by somebody? Councillor Hargreaves will second. Can I see those in favour of that resolution, please? So that is agreed. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we move to the discharge of another condition at 23 Camden Hill Square. And I should say in advance, thank you so much for bearing with us while we go through a number of quite elaborate applications. So the discharge of condition, Gavi, I think you're going to introduce this, aren't you?
Thank you, Chairman. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to the committee addendum report, which includes clarifications and amendments to the officer's report, including an additional objection which has been received. This is an application for the approval of details reserved by condition for the submission of details relating to details of materials, side windows, hard and soft landscaping, privacy screens and external lighting, along with details for flood risks and sustainable drainage and trees. Officers have reviewed and assessed all 3 conditions to be acceptable, and the application is brought back to committee as it was requested that condition 3 is determined by members. For ease of reference, I have included the wording of condition 3 on this slide for members to see. Condition 3 requires the details of materials on the external faces of the building, details of windows, and a scheme of landscaping for the rear terrace, and that the scheme should show an enhanced level of planting around the edges of the terrace. Members will also note informative 6, which provides guidance for the applicant to use the landscaping provision as part of a previous permission in 1975. This slide shows the approved terrace at the rear on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, the proposals show the landscaping scheme, which has been submitted as part of the condition. For reference, I've also included the 1975 permission, which shows the amount of landscaping which was approved on the terrace previously. This slide shows the details of the landscaping proposed through the condition and the roof light to the rear. And this slide shows a section of the terrace which shows the height of the proposed planting. Officers have come to the view and conclusion that the submitted details are acceptable and that the condition can be discharged. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now we have speakers for this case, and I think the objection, Mr. Hopkins, I think you, sir, are going to speak, or who wishes to speak? You're going to go first.
Yes.
You've got up to 3 minutes shared between you as you wish. Okay? Go for it. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and councillors. We meet again 8 months on from the last meeting at which the committee made it abundantly clear to the applicant as to what they needed to do in order to protect their neighbours' privacy, which was very simply to follow the documented 1975 landscaping plans, which showed a 2.2 metre buffer, which they have failed to do, even making my situation worse by removing the 1975 raised roof light, which you saw on the screen previously, which currently safeguards my privacy in the most vulnerable spot, which overlooks into my dining room. So I'm here this evening with my fellow neighbours to help remind the applicant what was clearly discussed and agreed at the last meeting and well documented, so that when they resubmit and revise their landscaping, they do follow the 1975 plans, which were specifically designed to protect people's privacy. Even 50 years ago, when the rules were much more relaxed, they took privacy matters seriously. And I'd like to thank the councillors for also taking our privacy issues so seriously. We are very grateful and thank you.
Thank you, Carmel. Chairman and members, look, thank you for your time and attention this evening. My wife and I are owners of number 24, which is immediately next door to the proposed development. We've lived and worked in K&C for over 30 years. We have 4 children which attend Fox Primary School. My wife is a governor of Fox, also a trustee of Fox and Holland Park Schools, of the PTA, and I'm a treasurer of the Communal Garden Square at Camden Hill. We are not paid for consultants or developers. We are just residents. And look, we are joined by many concerned other neighbours in the area. Look, this development that's being proposed here would normally never have been allowed. If you can picture a 90 square metre roof terrace that could accommodate over 100 people looking into the surrounding bedrooms, bathrooms of my neighbours, this roof terrace was not accessible because of the way it was designed very easily. There was asbestos risk. As far as we can see, it hasn't been used for over a decade. This is why there has been a very, very strong reaction with over 15 objections put forward for this rather unusual requirement to come back to discharge this privacy and safety condition that we're now looking at. At our last meeting, it was confirmed that to protect privacy and safety, the original 1975 measures should be re-implemented and reinstated, with explicit emphasis by certain members on this 2.2 metre boundary. Chairman, and your fellow councillors were very clear at that meeting, and I quote from you Chairman, if I may, it is extremely clear the direction and expectations. If there is an attempt to disregard with what we have said today, the committee does not have to discharge this condition. The acceptance of this guidance by the Planning Office was also crystal clear in the transcript that we have from that meeting. However, we're now confronted with a proposal that is not comparable with the 1975 measures in a number of key areas. It's not identical, but it's really quite problematic. The 2.2 metre boundary, which is essential for regulating the sight lines. Are you really going to stop me in the middle of the most important bit?
Well, just you conclude in a sentence, too, because you're well over.
Yeah, okay, but this is complicated. I've sat here for 3 hours.
No,
okay, and I've listened to some very complicated stuff. This is important. Okay, it is not identical to the 1975 measures, but it is problematic in a number of certain areas where there is no boundary, actually, along some of the party wall areas. There's a staircase that comes up next to our property, which allows people to look straight into our property. That's the purpose of this condition to prevent. There are safety issues where people can drop things through a glass ceiling. Again, not properly addressed.
Sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. There will be questions, I'm certain, from colleagues, so you know, you're not, this is not going to be the last opportunity.
Okay, it's noted that we have not been able to properly explain our issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the applicant is represented here now. Well, actually, you've got rather over 4 minutes, in fact, shared between you. How are you going to do this? How would you like to do this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will speak first of all, and then Stuart Stevenson. Yes, of course. Sorry. Apologies. Thank you. So whilst this application relates to a number of conditions, I'm just specifically going to address the terrace landscaping, which was following the grant of planning permission last year. Now, even before that, the applicants and their team engaged extensively with neighbours to try and achieve an agreeable landscaping scheme to all. During the periods of engagement, it was felt that common ground had been reached, which was often then followed up by correspondence seemingly contradicting these meetings. Despite the 1975 plan reference only being provided as an informative to the principal permission, the approach of the design team has always been to develop a robust scheme of planting and screening, one that's comparable to that of the 1975 plan, and one of which is an improvement on that scheme and would also provide an enhanced level of privacy. The use of the flat roof as a terrace in the 1975 plan was approved some 50 years ago, and I expect the terrace landscaping had changed multiple times in the interim. And not least, as most of us are aware, for some years now, there has been no planting on this terrace. There surely can be no doubt, therefore, that the proposed landscaping scheme is infinitely better than the current situation, where there is absolutely no soft landscaping. Indeed, this is also reaffirmed in your officer's report, which advises the proposals will be an improvement. It will not only enhance the visual amenity of the surrounding area, but will significantly improve the amenity of neighbouring occupiers by reducing any perceived overlooking, which in turn will significantly enhance their privacy. This actually works both ways. Whilst the neighbours want to protect their privacy, my clients also seek privacy. And it is thus within my clients' interest, and also their desire, I hasten to add, to improve their own amenity for the enjoyment of their home as well as their neighbours. Engagement with the neighbours has been constant in the intervening period, but unfortunately with a continually moving goalpost on their part, and thus without success. But I can assure you it has not been for the want of trying. We trust the committee will agree with their officer's recommendation to approve the details submitted to discharge these conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. You've got a little bit of time left.
Okay, thank you. Stuart Stevenson from D3 Projects. Stuart Stevenson from D3 Projects, working as architects for the applicant. I'd just like to make it clear that in the 1975 proposal, just like to make it clear from the 1975 proposal, there was no element that was 2.2 metres wide. We have a scaled and dimensioned plan, which the the local authority have in their possession. There was elements that were 1.5 metres, there was elements that were 800 mil, there was elements that were 500 millimetres. There's a variety around the perimeter. What we've tried to do is rationalise that and provide a continuous border. What is different to the 1975 proposal is we are looking to provide deeper substrate for taller planting. The 1975 proposal only had a 200 mil substrate, so that's why the borders were larger in some areas. A 200 mil border would not support the type of planting that we're looking to introduce. And we feel as a design team, we've acted in good faith to try and develop a landscaping strategy that both works to develop an attractive natural landscape for our applicant, but also addresses the concerns of the neighbours.
Okay, all right, okay. Time is up. Okay, so opportunity for questions. Arian, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, anyone can answer from the applicant's team. Just for the benefit of the panel, the understanding is the rooftop has been granted around 1975, I believe. You're just discharging the 3 conditions that has been proposed, and you think that 2 meters is sort of uniform in terms of the structure or design.
No,
and the concerns about the overlooking of the privacy that was raised by objectors would be satisfied because you think your planters are much bigger. Is that what you're saying? Could you just briefly explain? Thank you.
Yes, we believe that we've provided robust planting of evergreen bushes in the most sensitive of areas, and then there'll be a maintenance regime to maintain that throughout the life of the roof terrace.
Just to follow up, so you've not been using the roof garden, presumably for a longer period of time, is that correct? And is there a reason for that? Thank you.
Well, the reason the roof was not in use was there was an elderly owner, and we believe that for a period, potentially his mobility was limited and wasn't able to access the roof terrace. But there is, if you look at the most recent Google aerial view, there's a table and chairs on the existing roof terrace. To say that it's never been used is incorrect.
Just to follow up to that one, any counter answer, because presumably the planning permission has been granted. The previous owner couldn't use, maybe because of mobility or any factors that are relevant to
So there are a number of factors, if I may. First of all, planting that needs maintained doesn't last very long, especially with a change of owner. And what this needs is hard landscaping that survives the change of control of the property. The fact that there is nothing on the roof, even though there were measures in 1975, tells you planting doesn't work. And therefore you need something that stands the test of time. You need hard landscaping, not evergreen bushes that may or may not be watered and maintained. The second point to add is that, as we understand it, the roof terrace is clad with asbestos. And it's poisonous. And there's a reason why people were not on it. The last time I saw someone on it, they had a hazmat outfit on. Okay, so there are a number of reasons. I mean, look, it's being made usable through this development. And there's no doubt the accessibility, the traffic, just the amount of use that we will see on this roof terrace will change. We have, all of our neighbours are very clear, this thing has not been used for over a decade.
Thank you, Jara. This question is to Daniela and Mr. Hopkins. Sorry, Ms. Daniela and Mr. Hopkins. You are not against, from what I have read from the application and to what I have seen from your comment, what I've read from your comments, you're not against that itself, the planning procedure. But what you're against, let me finish this point. I'll come to you. What you are against is the privacy privacy and for your family and the neighbouring and everything else.
Yeah,
so
yes,
can you make it very clear, please? If we were to go back to 1975, obviously 50 odd years ago, the need for someone to use their property, it does not allow us as councillors, decision makers, everyone who boats property or who lives in the property, whether it's age or anything else, they can use their property. But what you're questioning is the privacy, and I think that's, can you elaborate a bit more how it impacts your life and your family life?
So it's privacy and safety. We have a glass-roofed kitchen area where stones have gone through that glass ceiling thrown from the top of this roof terrace. Okay, so there's a genuine safety issue, and it's a privacy issue. We can get hung up on this 2.2 meters point. The point is, can you look into my master bathroom and where my children get dressed in the mornings as they get ready to school? I have a teenage daughter who gets ready in full view of this roof terrace. Now, with privacy screening, and we talk about the 2.2 because it was designed with the sight lines in mind, and it was very effective, the 1975. Now, they're not observing those lines, and I understand it doesn't have to be perfectly 2.2 meters, but the privacy and the safety should be the net result, and we do not get that through this proposal.
Thank you. Just to follow up, Chair, so what you're suggesting is what would be acceptable to you as a resident, obviously without objecting to development itself, and any one of you can answer. Do you want the conditions to remain, or you want the 2.2 for privacy, or it could be any other number that officers decide, or we councillors make the decision?
Yes, I just wanted to answer your first question. With my issue is privacy. There was a roof light that's been there since 1975. It is being ripped out, and it's not being replaced with anything, let alone landscaping. And it's my most vulnerable spot where people can get a direct view into my dining room. And it's not being addressed. I've tried to address it. However, I was told that the doors could not open inwards. They could not do sliding doors, that they didn't want to open the doors into a garden, straight into trees, because it's not feng shui. So that's my privacy issue. And in relation to your second question, it's just a matter of protecting my privacy. And the 1975 drew all the sight lines and how to protect the privacy. Putting railing inside so that you don't have to rely on planting. I will quote what I was told, that planting can grow, it can die, the leaves shed, we cannot control it. So what I'm requesting is that the railing, which they're replacing anyway, is put 2 metres within the boundary so that we don't have to rely on the planting.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question to that? Thank you very much for that answer. And may I also say, both of you, both the applicants and objectors, thank you for staying that long, and I'm sure the Chair have said that before, so I appreciate for you saying. But the question for you is the agent and the agent for the applicants. We as a councillors and decision makers cannot oppose applicants' application simply because the neighbours do not want development. We have to make a decision based on the resident safety, based on the merit, and for that reason, what will be applicable acceptable to you or to your to the applicant for this to look after the resident safety and privacy, as well as for you to developing your home as you wish, because it's your home and you can build as you wish with the guidance of the council. So what will be acceptable to you and to protect the resident safety and privacy?
The landscaping strategy that's been submitted is a robust strategy. If we were to look at the sections that have been produced, the sensitive area that the objector is referencing to actually has evergreen bushes at 2 metres tall. That is a more robust physical barrier than the roof light that she's mentioning. We have gone through a process of working with a landscaping consultant to make sure that as much as possible all sightlines are minimised. For reference, there's 37 houses that look onto this, onto these rear gardens, there's no way that we can possibly block all sightlines, but we're going to do our best, and we have done our best to try and appease the neighbours. I think the current strategy is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a follow-up question in terms of guidance. Obviously, as decision makers, we have to rely on what's in front of us. We cannot rely on the goodwill of residents, what they will do later on, but the information that we have. Will it be possible for you to, for example, what has been suggested by the applicant, and not that you have to take it, but railings or 2.1 or 2.2 or anything to do with that, will that be reasonable for you so that we can make a decision based on what you will see acceptable, will also make the privacy of the neighbours well? So please answer if you can. Thank you.
The balustrade is positioned on top of the raised parapet in line with approved document Part K, which requires a 1.1 metre balustrade to protect fall. If it was to be positioned inside the planters and the planters are maintained as they're set out in the condition, this would increase a health and safety risk. They would need to install a fall arrest system, which more than likely would be put onto the top of the raised parapet. I feel that it's a nonsense to move the balustrade when it's in a perfectly reasonable position and the planting is robust enough to reduce the sightlines.
One final question.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Question to the applicant again. So from the rooftop border, so basically the border of the wall, so if you jump, you go down. From there, your landscaping, how far does it go inside?
As you can see from the strategy, it changes throughout the roof terrace. The minimum is 550 mil, which reflects the 1975 proposal, as you can see on that proposal. Okay, so as I was saying, I'm talking about the specific area closest to Carmel's boundary.
I'm sorry, you can't have the conversation between yourselves, I'm afraid. No.
You get an opportunity where that.
Okay. The level of planting differs in terms of depth across the area. That is due to a number of elements. But where the planting is shallower, the planting is taller. Where it is wider, it is lower. Each location, though, protects the privacy of the neighbours. We've already been through this. We've had site meetings with the clients, so with the objectors, and we felt that we had found common ground. Unfortunately, as soon as we left that meeting,
Thanks
that
for the
changed.
Explanation. Could you, I mean, it could be an arbitrary number. Could you tell me the length of the landscape? 1 meter. I know you said 550 centimeters, but
so the previous 1975 proposal had 32.03 meters squared of planting. The new proposal has 32.9 square meters of planting.
But that's the cumulative. What I'm asking, if this is the borderline, how far would your planting be on
the proposal that was submitted has a fully dimensioned setting out plan, which you can reference.
Thank you. Sorry, for the objectors, could you just a counter answer? You get your final opportunity. Thank you.
So if you look at the drawing on the top right there, so there's two places where actually there is no planting at all. So the very top right-hand corner where it's actually, I'll be right there, come on. On the top right-hand corner, that's actually where the staircase comes up, and it's right up against the party wall. There is no planting there. If you look in that little square in the top right-hand corner, that is absolutely adjacent to our party wall. At the bottom right-hand corner, which is Carmel's area, that's very, very narrow. And so, really. And actually, if you go back to the previous picture, please. Thank you. If you look on the left-hand side of the drawing where there's like a rectangular shape sort of protruding, if you were to draw a line from left to right, from that, each end of that box, that will show you where the 1975 line was. You can see quite clearly where the non-greenery is. It actually sits within inside those boundaries. So that again, we can get hung up on this 2.2. What matters is the sight line. So if you're stood in that white area, you can look straight into my bathroom, frankly. And if you are stood in the bottom right-hand corner, you can look straight into Carmel's breakfast room. And so, you know, I know it's got lots of wonderful consultants all over it, but it doesn't work. Okay? And it also doesn't stand the test of time, because all of that greenery could die, and it won't be there. Okay?
It's referenced in the condition that it must be maintained through the lifetime of the roof terrace.
I wanted to answer the question that was asked.
Sorry, only members of the committee can ask questions. Waller, do you want to? Okay. Right. Okay. All right. No. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, everyone. Okay. Thank you. So, questions to officers. Who'd like to go first? Gerard and then Waller.
Just on the asbestos question that's been raised by the objectors, could we clarify what the position is in terms of the existing roof now, please?
There's no condition relating to asbestos under consideration this evening, so I'd just advise members to consider the
I'd happily provide some context if that's of use. Sure.
It's not a matter in front of us this evening, so
thank you. That's made that clear.
Let's leave that.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the officers: is it seems we had an application in place. We had an approved application in place, and this is to do what? Is this something new alteration, additions? What happened to the approved application?
So planning permission has already been granted for the development, which includes a new terrace. So the existing structure that's there that you can see in the photographs, etc., at the back, will be in the most part demolished. A new terrace goes back that's a different size and shape, similar but different. And these are the conditions that have been attached to that permission relating to details, which includes the landscaping we've heard a lot about, flood risk and trees. So it's just the details that members need to consider.
Am I correct in assuming that part of the conditions is the greenery to stay green at all times, and if anything happens, if any plant dies, it needs to be immediately replaced?
Yes, yeah, that's part of the condition.
So, just an extension to that question, would there be an enforcement action taken if that's not maintained?
I mean, it would have to be subject to an investigation and expediency and so on and so on. But yes, you could serve a breach of condition if, you know, things weren't installed correctly.
Sorry, just to pedantic on that. Installed correctly and maintained correctly, because that's one of the issues that the objectors are concerned about. We might approve this tonight, but in a year's time it could all be dead. You're saying there are conditions that would ensure that if that happened, there will be enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the condition is designed to do, secure planting there to establish, and if it is not, well established, in line with the details that you're seeing this evening, it would be our intention to serve notice, breach of condition or something similar. That's the purpose of the condition, and we believe it's enforceable.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to recap all the officers to clarify. I understand the conditions, but this application has already been granted with the conditions attached to before. What you're saying today is requirement to remove those conditions. Am I correct in understanding? Just to be safe side on the decision making.
It's to discharge the details. So planning permission's been granted, subject to conditions, and these are the details for those conditions, and you're determining this evening whether those details satisfy the reason why we attached it.
Thank you. Just to make that clarification, but it goes back to the question we had about the privacy, and the residents mentioned that has been taken into account, or was it? As the question is now, because if we go back to the 50 odd years ago, 1975, and what has been decided, what will be the condition? Why is it is it coming up now for the same issue? Because whoever lives after 100 years later will still have a privacy issue.
So the 1975 permission related to a different size terrace, a different terrace. So this has now changed it because it's a new development that's been granted by colleagues at a different meeting. So the condition now, we kind of get a new starting point where we can secure details of landscaping, and that's what we're getting, and that's what we believe to be enforceable. But it is a different terrace to what was approved in 1975.
Final question, Chair. I understand that's the question, that's the point, but the question is again the planting on all weather. How can one rely on planting and the goodwill of residents?
I mean, it's difficult to rely on planting. I'm not going to say otherwise, but a terrace exists there now. Planning permission has been granted for a new terrace, and what's before you this evening to consider is the landscaping proposal. If we narrow down on that condition as well as others, does it meet what is required there? Does it provide an enhanced level of planting, noting the informative? And that's what officers are confident it satisfies that condition, and that's why the recommendation's before you. But this evening it's up to you to make that decision, and if you agree.
Well, we have to make a decision, colleagues. Can I start by saying we haven't discussed, am I right in thinking that the condition 5, flood risk, condition 7 relating to trees, that the discharge of those conditions we think is uncontroversial. No one's seemed to sought to discuss them at all. Am I correct about that? The condition 3, which is at the heart of the discussions we've had, how do people feel about this? What do you think? Arian, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. I think the condition that put forward to maintain, as stressed by Councillor Hargreaves, not only just maintain but also preserve that, would safeguard many of the issues that's been raised by the objector. So I'm quite convinced with that condition. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else who'd like to go? Jared?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I sat on the committee that brought this condition. So we have a very robust plan here, obviously, with living material. We can't guarantee that, but we have a robust plan. And if you're telling me that there are enforcement powers we could use if that isn't carried out, then I'm minded to think actually we've met that condition. It's not going to please everybody, of course it's not, but I think in terms of the condition we put on it and what has been presented to us this evening, I think it's gone towards meeting that.
Well, in that case, I think we probably can make a decision. So the recommendation is that we agree that actually 3 conditions are all discharged. Can I see those in favour of that, please? Those against? Okay, so that is agreed by 4 votes to 1. Councillor Ali dissented. Good. Right. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. If we can now move on to consider the application at 39 Kempsford Gardens, please. Gabi, back to you, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for replacement windows from single to double glazed timber replicas. This application is required to come to committee as it is a council-owned application. As there are no speakers for this case, there is no presentation. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and for the reasons set out in the officer's report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Just bear with me a second. So if I can just, if I could just ask you, please, to leave as quietly as possible, that would be very kind. Your various things. Okay. So, colleagues, the recommendation is to grant here. Are there any questions to officers or anything? I think it's fair. So, can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? So that is agreed. If we can now move to consider the application Kingsgate House on the King's Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for advertisement consent for the installation of 2 advertisements on a scaffold shroud. It's important for members to note that this is a renewal of an existing consent. As there are no speakers for this case, there is no presentation. The application is recommended for approval, subject to a time limit condition of 1 year, and for the reasons set out in the officer's report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions about this? There are no speakers? No? Okay. Well, in that case, I think we can probably proceed to a vote. Recommendations to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. If we can now consider the application at Alum House, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for replacement windows from existing aluminium framed to UPVC framed double glazed windows. This application is required to come to committee as it is a council-owned application. As there are no speakers for this case, there's no presentation. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Any questions? We're satisfied that the profile of the replacement windows is satisfactory, and they're not too heavy and look unsightly. Because this is, as I recall, Alum and Barlow House are a pair of buildings that they sort of face each other, as I remember. We're satisfied with that?
Yes, I think the application is supported by detailed section drawings which show the windows to be slim double glazing, and the site's also not within a conservation area as well.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. Finally, we have 2 applications next door to each other. First of all, there is 2324 Tadima Road. Is that right, Gerard? Tadima Road. Get that correct. Gabi. No, I'm sorry. We've moved on to other items of business. So you're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of our meeting, but you can't interrupt, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. There you go, Gabi.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for the installation of a steel handrail to the external entrance of the building. This application is also required to committee as its council own. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and for the reasons set out in the officer's report. Thank you.
Are there any questions about that? No?
There's something about the numbering of the properties in one of the objections, but I don't think it's particularly relevant, is it? I don't think it actually makes a difference, so don't worry. I don't think it makes a difference. It was more of a comment. It wasn't an objection. It was a comment, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Recommendation here is to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. And finally, the neighbouring property, number 25. Jared, help me. Tadima Road. Gabi, for the final time this evening.
Thank you, Chairman. This is also an application for planning permission for the installation of a steel handrail to the external entrance of the building. This application is also required to come to committee as its council own application. The application is recommended for approval subject to the reasons set out in the officer's report. Thank you.
Any questions or comments on this? No? Okay. The recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, that concludes our meeting. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.